U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken has arrived in Shanghai on his first visit to China in 10 months, with tough talks on the cards. Ties between the two superpowers appear to have stabilised, but an array of issues still persists over things such as the South China Sea and Taiwan, trade, as well as tech. The top American diplomat will meet with business leaders before heading to Beijing for discussions on Friday with his counterpart, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and a likely meeting with President Xi Jinping. Mr. Blinken's visit comes as Washington ramps up pressure on the Asian giant, with the U.S. Congress moving ahead on a package of bills that includes new funding for Ukraine and Israel. Around $8 billion has also been approved for the Indo-Pacific region, including Taiwan, to bolster defences against China. And on top of that, the legislation contains a measure to ban TikTok in the United States. Now, if the popular social media app doesn't cut ties with its Chinese parent company, ByteDance. And for more, we're joined by CNA's Olivia Xiong. She's live for us from Beijing, as well as Nick Harper. He is live all the way in Washington, D.C. Nick, first to you. An array of thorny issues on the table here. What are some of the things that Washington is most concerned about?
Dawn, you're right. There are plenty of issues at stake here, really a long list. But Washington has been setting out its priorities, signalling them over the course of the last week or so. On the economic front, it's all about unfair trade practices. On the human rights front, they're worried about the possibility of genocide in Xinjiang against Uyghurs. They've detailed that in an annual State Department human rights report that's come out in just the last week. And then, of course, Taiwan. You mentioned that $8 billion that will be going to the island and to allies in the Indo-Pacific, sending a very strong message from the US that it is trying to counter China in the region. And we're also told that Antony Blinken will not be pulling any punches. The State Department saying that he will raise concerns clearly and candidly. So plenty for him to talk about. And he says that he will be raising every single one of those concerns with top officials in Beijing.
Olivia, let's bring you in here. The same question to you. From its perspective, what are China's concerns?
Well, as Nick mentioned, clearly going to be tough talks ahead because the message from China in response to the rhetoric from the U.S. in the lead up to this visit has been quite clear and consistent. It says that, yes, it wants stable ties with the U.S., but that is not going to back down when it feels that its interests are being infringed on. And it has been angered, it says, by what it sees as the U.S. trying to take steps to contain its development, whether it's over Taiwan, Russia, or increasingly over accusations of Chinese industrial overcapacity, especially in the electric vehicle sector. We have seen Chinese officials and state media really step up their defense of their industry in the last few days, using stronger language, China calling it a false narrative and, quote, economic coercion and bullying, saying that this is just an excuse for American protectionism. Remember the context of this as well. China is trying to give its economy a boost amid its fragile post-pandemic recovery. And besides the U.S., we also have seen the Europe voice its concerns about industrial overcapacity. And one of the strategies that China has talked about for its economy to grow is to focus on its electric vehicle sector. So a lot is at stake here as China has the economy in mind. Dawn.
Lots at stake here. But, Nick, let's take a look at what some analysts perhaps are saying is at the core of the problem. They seem to think that challenging current Chinese-US relations is that China, on the one hand, hopes to first have the right attitude before addressing problems. But on the other hand, the United States wants to discuss the issues that are on the table without first discussing the attitude. Now, taking that into account, Nick, are we likely to see any breakthroughs at all?
But when you put it like that, I mean, it sounds as if both sides are coming at it from very different mindsets, which in many ways they may be. And the US going into this is really trying to downplay expectations. The State Department was asked whether it expected to see any concrete action out of this. Without exactly saying it, it was saying no. It said it was clear-eyed about its expectations for this. So in many ways, they're trying to put the emphasis instead on strengthening the relationship, on managing the relationship, and trying to build on some of the commitments that are already there. So those are the areas of cooperation that both sides have discussed before, things like climate change, AI, military-to-military coordination, and also counter-narcotics, both sides trying to work on stopping fentanyl spreading around the world. But the US, on that point, said that so far they haven't seen much concrete action from the Chinese side in trying to battle that problem.
The goal, Ollie, may be to sort of improve those ties and stabilise them, but maintaining those ties, there's still an impact. Will all of this somehow affect how China responds to US actions? I mean, potentially over Russia and the potential ban on TikTok.
Don, the devil's always in the details, isn't it? And we know that China is likely calibrating its response very carefully. On the one hand, we know that to its domestic audience, it doesn't want to appear weak when faced with a superpower like the US. But at the same time, it also wants to avoid any actions that may hurt its economy. For Russia, we know that China has said that it has a right to conduct normal economic exchanges with all countries as it has continued to maintain this so-called neutral position when it comes to Russia's war in Ukraine, also calling the U.S. a hypocrite for approving aid to Ukraine. And when it comes to TikTok, neither the company nor the Chinese government has actually said how it is going to respond. TikTok perhaps in a little bit of a pickle, not wanting to appear too close to the Chinese government, which has been fueling those concerns in the U.S. So perhaps a little bit of a dance and a very delicate balance that China will need to strike here.
All right, Olivia, thank you for that. Olivia Xiong there and Nick Harper.